what's happened in the last few years in Myanmar is unprecedented anywhere in the world. Certainly the speed at which what has happened is unprecedented. So a few years ago, the previous Myanmar administration opened up the telecommunications market, and they allowed two international telcos to come in and have licenses to operate, and that was Telenor and Ooredoo. And what happened literally overnight was that the price of a SIM card fell from sort of $250 down to $1.50. And this incredible pent-up demand that there had been amongst the population to be able to have a phone that worked and to be able to access data on that phone, that demand began to be met. In the space of less than 2 years, Myanmar has gone from having just a few million people with access to mobiles and the internet to the telcos are now reporting more than 45 million active SIM cards in the market. So, some people have, more than one SIM card. Some people have more than 2 SIM cards. But our best guess is that the penetration rate is now well over 50%.
5 years ago, before I left Singapore, I didn't own a smartphone. I didn't even own a GSM, like a feature phone. The reason for that is, I'm sure you've read it in menus, the main reason for that is SIM cards usually cost more than $2,000 or $3,000 on every individual SIM card, right? So not many people have access to mobile phones. If you have access to it, you're either rich or you're well connected. And when I came back, I started seeing things because there were influx of telcos coming in. So the prices of SIM cards generally dropped to $1.50 right now. Right now, everyone can afford to buy a SIM card. And just timed nicely, the Chinese smartphones are rising, right? So essentially, the Chinese smartphones become really cheap. So together with the lower cost of SIM cards, now everybody can actually afford a smartphone. And that has an impact on our ability to that kind of forces us to leapfrog the whole desktop era. For example, my mom, my grandparents never really learned how to use a computer, a desktop, but now they're operating, using Excel on their mobile phones, they're using PowerPoint, etc. So I think this whole mobile penetration era actually helped us a lot. In fact, right now, having like 50,000 people who has access to internet in the last 4 years, right now we have 50% of the whole country having access to the internet. So that's a huge difference. And with that comes with communication, efficiencies. Now I can pick up the phone and talk to anyone that I want in any parts of the world or any parts of the country. Before that, when I was studying in Singapore, I couldn't really talk to my parents for I only talked for twice a month, because they had to travel to this particular internet cafe at a particular area because they are the only ones with proper internet connection and proper connectivity. So from that in the last 4 years, and now it's a huge jump.
I think the leapfrog, firstly, is just empirically true. We have data to show that this leapfrog is happening, and that data shows that Myanmar's leapfrog is happening at a rate that's unprecedented anywhere else in the world. I think that before Myanmar had its connectivity revolution, the best examples of countries going from sort of single-digit percentages of people with access to mobile and internet were probably Vietnam and I think probably Vietnam in this region, and I believe they did it in 5 years. They went from sort of 3 or 5% to 75% of the population having access to mobiles and the internet in 5 years. So Myanmar's doing it much faster than that, and it's doing it at a time when the cost of smartphones has fallen to such a degree that even in a country that's relatively poor like Myanmar, smartphones are affordable for a lot of people.
If you talk to anyone, layman on the street, you ask them what is internet? It's Facebook. They don't even know what Google is. Google is not the starting point. a lot of us, geeks, Google is a starting point. Any information that you want to look for is on Google. But majority of here, you go and ask anyone, is all on Facebook. So right now, last 2 years ago, in terms of SIM data user is about 5 million. Now it has grown to 50 million user base. So that means everyone is on the smartphone, and they're using data fairly a lot, and they consume a lot of these days. The consumption of media, the consumption of news, the consumption of information has actually evolved.
Myanmar is still really nascent. I would say it's new. It was new 2 years ago, but still new now. Although there are a couple of things that prop up, namely, a good internet, or reasonably good internet is, available now, and that fuels all the, information uptake, digital content which are consumed by the population, right? In terms of that, it's great. But as a startup, all other things that you might need as a startup, we are still lacking, especially on funding. And we have a pretty decent community who work together, help each other out. But in terms of funding, corporate structure, that's still lacking. And with places like Phandeeyar, we have very accessible office space now, which is a good thing. So compared to the others, like say Malaysia, Singapore, where they have a lot of components which we are missing, we're still lagging. But we've made quite a few progress within the last 2 years or 3 years. So the main challenge will be competition from abroad. So if we wanted to do a social network or social media startup here, you'll be fighting against Facebook, and the government here is not going to be a protectionist government where we really open to all, and that will be quite a challenge for any startups who want to do something similar to overseas market. But on the other hand, apart from that, there are a lot of barriers, natural barriers that global startups, global tech companies cannot bring to here, especially things like language, local knowledge, and local networks, which are pretty hard to penetrate. Even after living here, coming back here from overseas for 2 years, I still, have to spend a lot of energy to penetrate the local network where you can close a business deal pretty well. Yeah.
As I said, it's very early days for this connectivity revolution in Myanmar. It's sort of barely 2 years old, and there's a lot of really encouraging things. So what we've seen is people do this leapfrog straight to smartphones. So the telecommunications companies here are reporting, all of them are reporting, that a majority of their users are using smartphones. And not only are they using smartphones, they're using data. And they're using much more data than I think the telcos predicted they would. Now, naturally, the sort of first things that people start using here are Viber, the messaging app, and Facebook. So Viber at the end of 2015 had 18 million active users, and Facebook today has maybe 10 or 12 million active users in Myanmar. And so because of network effects and lots of good reasons, when you get your phone and you start using data, you want to be connected to the things that other people are using, and so it's natural that at the moment they're the two kind of communication platforms that people are using. But I think that community is going to go beyond some of these platforms. It's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of those products and services that are going to be special to Myanmar being developed. And I say this having travelled around the region and seeing what other ecosystems in the region have come up with. And so, yes, it's true when you look at when you look at Indonesia or when you look at Thailand or even Vietnam, it is true that some of the big US tech giants have got quite a lot of traction for their products. But it's also true in all of those markets and others that there have been locally sort of homegrown products and services that you take advantage of the fact that local entrepreneurs really understand the market and what's needed, and then they can go out and solve very specific problems. And so that's what we're hoping is going to happen in Myanmar, and that's what we're trying to encourage through our programs, is people to develop things that really work for this market.
If a few of us or one or two get successful, they will definitely become a role model for next generation of inspiring startup or next batch of inspiring startup. And I think that will also create investment. If we all know that there is actually within the country itself, there's a lot of people with a lot of capitals, and they just been holding off of different kinds of investments. And if we see that the startup, it actually makes sense to invest in, I think that will create will give us an acceleration in terms of the growth of startup ecosystem, the growth of startups in Myanmar itself, and even opportunity for us to go overseas. In terms of infrastructure here, it's not fantastic. It's terrible. We have blackout. We have fiber uplink. That is on a very limited bandwidth. So, and then these cables are all exposed cables. So there are times when somebody knocked our cable off, and then we end up with no internet access and so on. We have all these other challenges that we face on day-to-day basis. Like having an office space is also a challenge here right now with how the economic is changing. So as for us, I think a lot of, even not just entrepreneur in a digital space, a lot of even traditional business, normal other small business has learned to adapt to that situation. So right now we have we have backup plan A, B, and C, and sometimes can go every single alphabet. So for internet, if a fiber uplink down, we got mobile data. If the mobile data down, there's actually a WiMAX service that we can use. So different sources. Of course, the backbone is down, then there's no choices for us left. In terms of electricity, we have backup battery power. If the battery power fails, then we have generators running. But of course, it get discomfortable, so we couldn't on our air cons, etc. during all these blackout periods.
I always try to be positive. I'm a pretty optimistic guy. So on a positive side, it actually forces us to be more creative and think about different solutions of how to overcome blackouts, of how to overcome slow internet. On the other hand, we just spend, it's always a time because simple things like sending emails, etc. Now we really cannot do it because sometimes when the blackout happens, all of the mobile towers are down, so we get no signal. So things like that are really, really challenging, and especially for us, we work with a lot of international clients, and you cannot really tell an international client that we have a blackout, so I can't send you stuff, I can't deliver, right? So at once I actually had to travel around the town to actually find a place with internet, which is a hotel, and then I had to sit there for an hour or two just to finish my work and to deliver stuff to a client. I think he was in America. So people in developed countries would never be able to understand this kind of situations that are happening in countries like Myanmar. But it actually helped us to think of creative ways, think of once again being scrappy.
So if you look at it, that the app stores, Google Apps, Play Store, and app stores has a very limited accessibility here. We can only download free apps and things like that. And a lot of the locals here, they don't know how to use that functionality. They may be using a smartphone, but they don't have an email account, right? They don't know what is email account at all. So how do you download those apps? So that's actually quite unique in the sense that in other developed countries, and telco dictate what apps get installed into the devices and so on. Here, it's not the telco. is actually the mobile phone shops. So the mobile phone shop is actually enabling a lot of locals to get in their content, their apps, and even fixing some of the problems that they face along the way. So when you buy a brand new, open a package, brought a new phone, you will realize that you actually have additional apps inside your phone, which is not by the telco, but which is by the phone shop. And anytime you need new updates, you can just go to the mobile shops, and then they will do the update or do the installation. And same thing, you need to have your Google accounts top up, recharge. Just that's how it works here. So payment is one of the key issues that we need a solution, because everything is cash based, and for technology based product to scale out and accelerate, we need a very portable payment solution.
It's actually, I mean, if you live here, well, at least for a year, you will actually see improvements day to day, because I mean, the telcos are doing everything that they can to build new fiber lines, etc. So I think it's only a matter of time until we actually get maybe not like Singapore, but maybe the same bandwidth and speed as Thailand or Vietnam, which is actually very workable. I don't think in the next 5 years we'll get like 1 Gbps of internet, but we'll get to at least 100 megs, and I think that's sufficient enough.
People who've never left here have the knowledge that you will never have, who has grown up overseas or lived a long time overseas. But on the other hand, people who has been living and working in overseas have a different view of things compared to people who never left the country, right? It's apparent when you see places like restaurants, which is run by someone who's never been overseas, compared to someone who just came back. Especially when it comes to little problems, and how they handle things there. And this is my assumption, right? If you grew up here, I'm growing very accustomed to this now. I tolerate a lot of things. I don't find it funny to accept this kind of some trouble. I no longer find it very strange to see someone bribing anymore. But as someone who just came back, you will see a lot of things that are really odd in their eyes. That adds to the local ecosystem in terms of how they ensure the quality, how they approach things differently. But on the other hand, to get things done, you also need a local knowledge where you can get things done without having to have a big fight, right?
Myanmar tech entrepreneurs are, I think, first and foremost focused on their own market, on the Myanmar market. As I said earlier, there's huge unmet needs and huge demand for products and services here in Myanmar, and so it's a big national market, and the opportunity here is significant. I think one of the things that's actually challenging for the community of tech entrepreneurs here is not where are the opportunities, it's how to pick which opportunity to focus on, because there's just very little of the things that we see even in other regional markets here. And so we sometimes say at Phandeeyar that you could drive a truck through the holes in this market, and so picking which ones you're going to try to fill is more a challenge of choosing what to focus on when there's so much that could be done.
When we talk or pitch to the investors, we always thought we'll go regional, we'll go global, and Myanmar is not an easy market itself. You are always fighting an uphill battle to have a good business in Myanmar. And if an entrepreneur can conquer that uphill battle, I'm not sure if he have enough energy left to go and conquer other markets. But Myanmar is a big enough market, like 50 million people, and that's good enough for a startup, you know. But you know, I won't be surprised there are one or two guys who just made it out of this 50 million, and you know, go ahead and go regional and global. And of course, we'll really love to see that.
You have almost like sort of 15, 20 years of consumer internet and consumer internet services sort of being built at the same time. So some of the tech entrepreneurs that have got real traction in this market now have been rolling out things like car listing sites, you know, job sites, housing sites, those sorts of directory listing services, kind of classified services that really were kind of the core of that early consumer internet back in the mid 90s in the US and other developed markets. And so we're seeing all of that. And then there are folks who are building the Myanmar version of Shazam or SoundHound, you know, like music identification apps. They've gone and they've indexed, like, you know, huge amounts of local music. There's people, you know, there's a local tech entrepreneur here has launched a version of Uber. So what I'm saying is that you can, is one of the things that makes this market interesting is that all of this stuff is being built at the same time. The sort of the full range of sort of 15, 20 years of, you know, consumer internet. It's all coming together now.
So Yangon is a hot spot, right, for startups. But places like Mandalay, there are one or two guys who are doing it in their own garage without anyone knowing it. But naturally, for my friends who do startups or products, it always seems better to have the product launched or tested in Mandalay before we actually come to Yangon. That came as a surprise for the new entrepreneurs, because Yangon is vibrant, all the things, but it has a lot of competition. Whereas in Mandalay we have less price sensitivity, and the people there are willing to try new things, which is great for any startup. And any other place, Naypyidaw, you don't really have a big population, so we can't really test or launch anything. But I think it would be a good place in terms of infrastructure. Say you have good internet, electricity, power, all those. Office space is relatively cheap compared to Mandalay and Yangon.
I think the last thing I would add is, to all those folks who are interested in technology in developing markets, come to Myanmar. Come and visit, come and see what's happening, and come and share your ideas and experiences. I think the thing that we love about this environment that we're in here at Phandeeyar is there's an incredible hunger and desire to learn. We see so much enthusiasm amongst the community, and so if you're interested in Myanmar, come and visit, come and share your skills and experiences, and there's a community here that's eager to learn, that's eager to learn. So. Yeah, for those who are listening, come and visit, come and share. Overnight was that the price of a SIM card fell from sort of $250 down to $1.50, and this incredible pent-up demand that there had been amongst the population to be able to have a phone that worked and to be able to access data on that phone. That demand began to be met. In the space of less than 2 years, Myanmar has gone from having just a few million people with access to mobiles and the internet to the telcos are now reporting more than 45 million active SIM cards in the market. So, you know, some people have, you know, more than one SIM card. Some people have more than 2 SIM cards. But our best guess is that the penetration rate is now well over 50%.
5 years ago, before I left Singapore, I didn't own a smartphone. I didn't even own a GSM, you know, like a feature phone. The reason for that is, I'm sure you've read it in menus. The main reason for that is SIM cards usually cost more than $2,000 or $3,000 on every individual SIM card, right? So not many people have access to mobile phones. If you have access to it, you're either rich or you're well connected. And when I came back, I started seeing things because there were influx of, you know, telcos coming in. So the prices of SIM cards generally dropped to $1.50 right now. Right now, you know, everyone can afford to buy a SIM card. And just timed nicely, the Chinese smartphones are rising, right? So essentially, the Chinese smartphones become really cheap. So together with the, you know, lower cost of SIM cards, now everybody can actually afford a smartphone. And that has an impact on our ability to actually, I mean, that kind of forces us to leapfrog the whole desktop era. For example, you know, my mom, my grandparents never really learned how to use a computer, a desktop, but now they're operating, you know, using Excel on their mobile phones, they're using PowerPoint, etc. So I think this whole mobile penetration era actually helped us a lot. In fact, right now, I mean, having like 50,000 people who have.
What's happened in the last few years in Myanmar is unprecedented anywhere in the world. Certainly the speed at which what has happened is unprecedented. So a few years ago, the previous Myanmar administration opened up the telecommunications market, and they allowed two international telcos to come in and have licenses to operate, and that was Telenor and Ooredoo. And what happened